What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. The inclusion of Susanna Salter on the ballot, America's first female mayor, was a prank. On April 4, 1887, Susanna Salter became the first woman mayor in America's history. Elected in the small town of Argonia, Kansas, Salter instantly became one of the most famous politicians in America. Ironically, Salter never intended to run for office. Instead, in a prank, Salter's enemies added her name to the ballot on election morning. But the young woman was ready to be mayor, as the biography and quotes by Susanna Salter demonstrate. Who was Susanna Salter exactly? Susanna Medora Salter was just 27 when she became America's first female mayor. She was also the daughter of a woman's Christian temperance union officer and a former mayor. The temperance movement played a major role in Salter's election. The WCTU advocated for a Kansas alcohol ban and supported prohibition. That position earned them many enemies in the small town of Argonia. Women were granted the right to vote in Kansas just a few weeks before the election in April. For the first time, WCTU members could vote for candidates and policies that they approved, instead of simply promoting temperance as a private organization. The night before the election, the WCTU members decided to put forward a slate of candidates who supported prohibition. They held a caucus to choose prohibitionist men to support in the next day's election. However, wets, or prohibitionists, broke into the meeting to harass the women. The members of the WCTU, led by Salter, were not intimidated by the wets. In response, they decided to prank Salter and the WCTU members. Except for the addition of Susanna Salter as a candidate for mayor, the wet slate of candidates resembled that of the WCTU. Election day brought a big surprise for Salter's pranksters. In 1880s Kansas, candidates didn't file for office before Election Day. So Salter's pranksters were able to print ballots listing her as a candidate for mayor without Salter even knowing. The anti-prohibitionist men thought Salter would lose in a landslide, shaming the WCTU and preventing women from voting in the future. The first voters in Argonia were shocked to see Salter listed as a candidate on election morning. A delegation from the Republican Party immediately went to Salter's house, where Susanna was reportedly doing laundry. Salter declared that she would run for mayor if elected after learning about the prank. "All right, we will elect you and just show those fellows who framed this deal a thing or two," the delegation reportedly responded. The women of the WTCU cast aside the ballots they printed to vote for a man and rallied behind Salter. As a result, Susanna Salter won the election with a 2/3 majority. Salter herself voted on the afternoon of April 4, 1887. However, she didn't vote for herself, since it was considered improper. Instead, Salter left the box blank. The anti-prohibitionists who tried to humiliate Salter and the women of the WCTU were shocked at the result. Salter's victory made the front page across the country. Not surprisingly, news of Salter's victory quickly spread. And in papers across the country, Susanna Salter became a litmus test for women's suffrage. One Massachusetts paper declared, "The Kansas women have done it." Susanna Medora Salter, mayor of Argonia, a little town of 500 inhabitants, is the first woman ever elected to that office. And she is not an unsexed female either, but the wife of a lawyer and the mother of 4 children. Another paper expressed relief that Salter was a capable mayor. "There are many others in Kansas just as capable as she, but as among men, there are some incapable. It cannot be said now that the very beginning of women in office was a failure." Had the first female mayor proved disastrous, the paper worried, a second might never be elected. To advocates of women's rights, Salter's election proved that women could vote and hold office without disrupting society. A reporter from the New York Sun visited Argonia to report on the town's female mayor. "I asked Mrs. Salter if her ambition to act as a female politician or leader in women's suffrage circles had been aroused by her election," the reporter wrote. She quickly responded, "No indeed, I shall be very glad when my term of office expires, and shall be only too happy to thereafter devote myself completely, as I always have done heretofore, to the care of my family." Salter faced harassment and hate mail as mayor. Becoming the country's first female mayor made Salter a target. She received hate mail from an unknown sender praising her for holding office. One card, decorated with a drawing of men's underwear, declared, "When a woman leaves her natural sphere, and without her sex's modesty or fear, essays the part of man, she, in her weak attempts to rule, but makes herself a mark for ridicule, a laughingstock and sham." The verse concluded that nature made a great mistake by letting a woman take over a man's role. The Ontario Globe declared Salter was unlikely to win re-election after closing Argonia's gambling halls and saloons. "It isn't likely that next election day will find the male voters in a joking mood," the paper reported. As mayor, Salter also had to face 3 of the men who pranked her, because they were elected to the town council. Salter chose not to take a heavy hand as mayor of Argonia. In her first council meeting she declared, "Gentlemen, what is your pleasure? You are the duly elected officials of this town. I am merely your presiding officer." In one city council meeting, Salter argued against lowering the licensing fee for billiard tables. "Argonia shouldn't encourage billiard parlors with low taxes," Salter stated. Winning over the support of Aru in the town, Salter governed with confidence. Salter resigned as mayor after 1 year. Salter served her 1-year term, and earned $1 for her service, before stepping down as mayor. During her single year in office, Salter carried out the town's business as head of the city council. But when she stepped down, opponents to women's suffrage declared Salter a failure. One editorial read, "She is tired of the burdens of office. She intends to resume her private life and delegate management of the Argonian government to the more stern sex." Mayor Salter's experience proves that women's suffrage is its own cure. But overall the press declared Salter a success. The Leavenworth Times called her an intelligent, capable and conscientious officer, fully equal to all the requirements of her position. An Indiana paper said Mayor Salter is said to discharge the duties of her office in the most acceptable manner. A third reported on her very successful administration, adding, "When she was elected to her present office, her enemies predicted that she would make a failure of her effort to run the municipal affairs of Argonia. Up to the present time she has made no great blunders." Susanna Salter started a trend in Kansas. The next year Mary D. Lohman became the mayor of Oskaloosa, Kansas, which also voted in the first all-woman city council in U.S. history. 9 women were elected to the mayor's office across the United States over the next 10 years, 7 of which were in Kansas. Salter, the nation's first woman mayor, laid out her plan years later. "I just made those men of the council believe they were the nicest men in the world, and we got along admirably," Salter told the Holbrook News in 1911. Salter wrote to other women elected mayor, advising them to pursue a similar policy. As Salter explained, "I was very anxious for female mayors to make a success, just to demonstrate that women are capable of holding office." On April 4, 1887, in the small town of Argonia, Kansas, Susanna Medora Salter became the first woman to be elected mayor in the United States, not by choice or campaign, but because a group of men attempted to humiliate her and her fellow temperance activists, in a twist of irony that history would never forget. Born in 1860, Salter was just 27 years old at the time of her unexpected election, a young mother and the daughter of a former mayor. She also served as an officer in the Women's Christian Temperance Union, WCTU, which was a group that advocated for prohibition at a time when women in Kansas only had limited voting rights. The Wets, local men who opposed prohibition and used ridicule and intimidation to silence their activism, were at odds with these women, who were committed to the cause of moral reform and public decency. Just before the election, the WCTU planned to support a slate of prohibitionist male candidates and held a caucus to nominate them. But the meeting was disrupted by these anti-temperance men, who, rather than intimidating the women, left the gathering with a plan to mock them instead. They secretly printed ballots that were identical to the WCTU slate, with one important difference. Susanna Salter's name was listed as a mayor's candidate. Their goal was to embarrass her, to discourage the participation of women in politics, and to make a laughingstock of the temperance movement. However, what was meant as a prank would backfire spectacularly. In Kansas at the time, there was no requirement for candidates to file for office ahead of the vote, allowing anyone's name to be placed on the ballot last minute without their knowledge or consent. A group of local Republican men approached Salter at her home, where she was reportedly doing laundry, on the morning of the election, as voters began to notice her name among the candidates. They asked her if she would serve if elected. Her calm and dignified reply, "If elected, I shall serve," was all they needed to hear. They rallied their support behind her in a symbolic act of defiance against the pranksters. The WCTU women, seeing one of their own on the ballot, swiftly pivoted from their original plan and voted for Salter instead. The result? She won by a 2/3 majority. Notably, despite her overwhelming support, Salter herself did not vote for herself, leaving the box blank out of a sense of propriety that was typical for women of her time. The nation was shocked when she won the election. Newspapers from coast to coast picked up the story of the unexpected mayor of Argonia. In an era when many questioned whether women had the capacity or temperament to hold public office, Susanna Salter became an immediate symbol in the debate over women's suffrage. Some editorials were skeptical or even mocking, but many more acknowledged her competence and poise. "There are many others in Kansas just as capable as she," one article stated, "but as among men, there are some incapable." Had Salter failed, critics suggested, it would have taken decades for another woman to try. Instead, her success offered a powerful counterargument to those who doubted women's abilities in leadership. Journalists traveled to Argonia to witness this new kind of mayor firsthand. A reporter from the New York Sun asked Salter whether her political aspirations had been awakened by the attention and authority. Her answer was a modest and telling reflection of her priorities. "No, indeed. I shall be very glad when my term of office expires, and shall be only too happy to thereafter devote myself entirely, as I always have done heretofore, to the care of my family." Her humility did not shield her from criticism, though. Salter received volumes of hate mail and public scorn, some of it deeply misogynistic. One infamous card mocked her by saying that nature had erred in allowing a woman to take on a man's role, suggesting that stepping outside the domestic sphere made her a laughingstock and sham. Yet despite the jeers, Salter took office with grace. Interestingly, she had to work alongside 3 of the very men who orchestrated the prank, as they had been elected to the town council. Rather than seek revenge or exercise an iron grip over them, she opened her first council meeting by deferring to the body's will. "Gentlemen, what is your pleasure? I am merely your presiding officer. You are the town's duly elected officials." This collaborative and respectful approach earned her further admiration. Throughout her tenure, Salter demonstrated thoughtfulness and moral consistency. She resisted efforts to lower fees for billiard tables, arguing that the town should not encourage billiard parlors to flourish by making their operations cheaper. Her opposition to gambling and alcohol was firm, but she did not govern with pettiness or extremism. Nonetheless, some newspapers still predicted her political demise, with the Ontario Globe claiming that men would not be in a joking mood come next election day. And they were right in one sense. Salter did not seek re-election. After her 1-year term and a mere $1 in compensation, she stepped down from office and returned to private life. Though some used her retirement to suggest that women were unsuited for political leadership, many others saw her year as a quiet triumph. She is said to discharge the duties of her office in the most acceptable manner, one Indiana paper wrote, while another noted that she had made no great blunders. Her competence set a precedent that others would soon follow. In 1888, just a year after Salter's surprise election, Mary D. Lohman became mayor of Oskaloosa, Kansas, and was joined by an all-woman city council, the first of its kind in the country. In the years that followed, Kansas would become a hotbed of early female political leadership, with at least 9 female mayors elected in the following decade, 7 of them in Kansas alone. Susanna Salter's story is one of accidental greatness, a reminder that leadership can arise in the most unexpected circumstances. What began as a prank turned into a historic milestone. Her grace under pressure, her quiet dignity, and her refusal to be intimidated or reduced by critics helped redefine what was possible for women in American public life. Though she did not pursue a career in politics afterward and remained humble about her role, the ripple effect of her election helped fuel the growing suffrage movement and laid the groundwork for generations of women leaders to come. Salter's election was not merely a symbolic victory. It was the beginning of a real shift in American democracy. If it had happened today, what kind of impact do you think her story would have?